Hello brewers, sommeliers and beer enthusiasts, welcome to another Beer School episode. Do you have a phrase for you?
No, I don't. That's pretty good.
Okay. Yeah. Today we are here with Scott Janish from scottjanish.com,
Yeah.
an author of the book New IPA, which for me is one of the best books about homebrew in general, launched ever.
I appreciate that.
It's not just about IPAs and not just about hops. You have some really nice chapters about mouthfeel and other stuff.
Well, first of all, it's great to be here.
Yeah, this is really nice, right?
Yeah, this is amazing. It's been great. We both did some talks yesterday. We filled the entire agenda yesterday, I believe. But yeah, it's great to have that book done and out, and hopefully people are enjoying it. And I'm also busy doing have a brewery in Washington D.C. area that keeps me pretty busy too.
I asked for you guys to send questions for me to ask him, and I will pick this randomly here. Or do you have some question you want to?
I tried to read them, but I don't speak Portuguese.
Okay. What's your suggestion for dry hopping? How much hops?
I usually do about 5 or 6 ounces for a homebrew batch. I usually do that in a couple stages. The lower ABV beers, I'll do about 5 or 6 ounces, and then if it goes up to like an 8.5% double IPA, you can start putting more dry hops in it. Yep, the more hops, there's more there. The beer can handle a little bit more hops. Otherwise, if you throw that many at a lower ABV beer, it just gets too astringent. It's just too much green material, and higher alcohol helps with both like mouthfeel, and there's just more flavor there too. So as the ABV goes up, I think you can play with a little more hops.
The problem here is that we don't have like a golden rule for dry hopping, right? It's really hard to say, oh, this is the best way to dry hop.
Yeah.
I think you wrote that in your book.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say this is the exact way to do it. I mean, when I traveled around the U.S. Interviewing some of my favorite brewers, they all were dry hopping at different rates, and they were all making great beer.
Great beers, right.
So there's no hard and fast rule. It's kind of, you have to think about what do you want, what profile are you after, and then sort of dry hop to that.
Artesa Beer is asking, multiple dry hopping or just one?
I like to do multiple dry hops. You get there's some studies that show that you get a little more extraction when you are dry hopping in stages. So I usually do one towards the tail end of fermentation, and then wait about 3 days, and then I'll do another dry hop dose.
I think this is a little tricky for homebrew scale, because when you make your first dry hop, you can put it on active fermentation, in the final of active fermentation, right?
Yeah.
And you have no problems with oxygen. But the second and the third, there is no be active fermentation. And homebrew scale is really hard to get rid of that oxygen.
Yeah, that's right, because especially every time you open up your fermenter on the homebrew scale, you're exposing it to the same amount of oxygen that I would be on the professional scale, but you don't have as much liquid to sort of dilute it. So it's even more important to be very cautious about oxygen introduction in homebrew beers. And so how I used to do it as a home brewer is I would dry hop that post-fermentation dose in a keg. So I would add my hops to the keg, I'd purge the keg, and then I would take the beer from the fermenter and then transfer it in closed. So it would be a closed loop, closed transfer. The hops would be purged, and the keg would be purged, and that way I'm not introducing any oxygen.
You dry hop in the keg?
In the keg, yeah.
Oh, that's really nice. I never thought about it.
Yeah,
I have my technique of instant dry hopping. Have you ever tried this?
No.
I get a hop bag filled with hops, put on my keg, and just shake it for.
Just put the hops in a bag.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
there's some harsh problems, but I got a lot of harshness, but I get a lot of aroma.
Yeah, well, if it works, it works. There is something to consider about adding hops to a bag. Is they're more confined, and so there is some.
You have some limitations in mass transfer, right?
Yeah, you don't get as good of extraction.
It's really easier, but it's not the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Another question. I use enzymes, beta-glucosidases, exogen, to optimize the hops and maximize aroma and groups of terpenes and dry hop. Well, it was not a question. It's just a consideration. Great for you, man.
no, I mean that's what the talk I did yesterday afternoon was on using beta-glucosidase and how that enzyme can free up some of the bound compounds in hops, and so hopefully he's having good results from it.
What's your opinion about the limit of dry hopping? How much you can dry hopping and how much is not? It doesn't work anymore to put more hops.
Oh, okay. It's almost like
here you're saying like 10 grams per liter, 15 grams per liter. There's a study saying that over 8 grams per liter it's not working anymore, which I can translate for you as it's really hard.
What would
man.
8 grams per liter would be? That's not crazy.
No, it's really low.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can reach like saturation point, I guess, for hops. I don't know what it is for sure, but I'm always worried. I'm always looking for ways to use less. So if I can use enzymes to use less dry hopping, to me that'll free up more of the fruity flavors from the hops. And then by using less hops, I'm adding less vegetal material to it. And to me, that's trying to get more flavor without that like harsh green bite. And it depends on the hop. I mean, some hops require a little bit more dry hopping than others. They're just not as potent.
And this is a really nice subject because you say we can. It's difficult to dry hop a lot because you get this really green material and these green aromas. Most of them are sand, right? Mm-hmm. And I think. The biggest difference between Brazilian IPAs and American IPAs is about this. We dry hop like crazy here. Doesn't matter what we put in the dry hopping. We have tons of Mercen, tons of green, and tons of harsh.
Uh-huh.
And the beers I had in the US was more mellow and balanced. Thinking about this.
Well, that it kind of goes to the more like viscous the solution, so the more carbohydrates you're putting in, the more those green flavors are able to be retained in the beer. So if you're using a 20% oats or something like that in a beer and you're getting harsh flavors, you can try to back that down a little bit, like 10%, and make it a little less viscous, and then you might not retain as many of those green flavors.
The more viscous, the less hydrocarbon compounds you have.
Yeah.
Because they are not so soluble in water, right?
Yep. So the hydrocarbons, those are the percentage of the hop oils that are more volatile. So those are like if you throw them in the boil, for example, those hydrocarbons are going to boil off right away. They're in like a West Coast IPA, the hydrocarbons are very low, so you get really low myrcene levels. But in hazy IPAs, where that solution is really it's a thicker mouthfeel, those are being retained at a higher level, so that's why you're getting more of that.
It's really nice.
Yeah.
We have a question from Argentina. The name is really unpronounceable. Dear Jamal, it's hard because I'm reading in Spanish, translate to Portuguese, and trying to translate to English. I'd like to ask Janish about pH. Which pH in the boil to avoid harshness? Really good question, right?
Yeah, that's, Mike and I were talking about this. Michael Tomsmeyer, my business partner, brewer at Sapwood in DC, or outside DC, we were talking about boil pH and that we should probably pay a little bit more attention to it. It's not something we focus on. We focus more on the mash pH. So in hoppy beers, we shoot for pretty low pH. So we're going for like a 5.1 to 5.3, something in there, because the reason being, the more you dry hop a beer, these hazy IPAs get huge, massive amounts of dry hop. You raise that pH, and if the pH in the final beer gets too high, it's sort of, it loses that like sharp kind of
And-
crisp bite, and so that's why we're trying to set the stage for a lower final pH.
Akoshu asking about what is biotransformation.
What is biotransformation?
Yeah.
I like to think of it. For me, it's helpful to think of biotransformation in two ways. So it's basically the conversion of one compound to another compound. For hops and Saccharomyces and sweets in particular, that would be like geraniol to beta-citronellol, or it's the unlocking of bound compounds. So that could be, let's say a hop has a certain amount of free geraniol, so that's geraniol that can go into the beer pretty easily, and then has another section of the hop that's just bound geraniol. So you throw it in as a dry hop, it stays bound. It's not being used at all. It's not being utilized. So you need certain enzymes. In that case, it would be beta-glucosidase to release that bound compound.
One last.
Sure.
Okay. Why the hell Citra is so good?
That's the best question ever. You know, Citra is actually found to be one of the hops that is the most versatile. So it has about the same amount of bound compounds as free compounds. And so it's one of those hops that works good on the whirlpool. It works good as a dry hop. Because if you're using it late as a dry hop, you're getting free compounds that you're smelling. If you're using it in the whirlpool, some of those bound compounds and the free compounds will get in, and you might get some interaction with the yeast to release some of those. And it just smells so good,
Yeah,
and it
this is
works
great.
well with every hop. There's not another hop that doesn't really pair well with Citra. It's like a friend that gets along with all of your other friends.
Well, the last question is a question of mine.
Sure.
Yeah, in your book you say about how you say this in English, cohumulona?
Oh, cohumulone?
Cohumulon?
Yeah.
And we have this myth about cohumulon. The hops with a lot of cohumulon, like Citra, is not good for bitter.
Oh, because
Because it's a harsh in bitterness. And you say there's just one study about this, and it's like not a really good study. And it was like everyone read that study and it became a thing, and no one.
changed everyone's
Yeah,
mind.
I use hops with low cohumulon. I use Cinco to
As a bitter?
Yeah.
You know, there's no. So the idea is hops that are high in cohumulone will be a harsher bitterness.
Yeah.
There's that study that you were talking about, and I think it was in the 70s.
Yeah. It's really the whole.
It found that the hops, or a beer that was brewed with cohumulone, tasted harsher. But what they didn't really necessarily point out was that the one that tasted harsher was higher in isoalpha acid, so it was a higher bitter beer. So of course it tasted harsher than the beer it was being tested next to. So it was sort of a faulty test.
Yeah, that happens all the time.
But then the word got out, and so everyone was.
And not just us home brewers, but the hop harvest.
Yeah, they
right?
started.
They try to
changing-
breed to get rid of cohumulon.
Yeah, that's my understanding, which is kind of crazy, right? But I haven't seen any academic papers that show that it is in fact harsher. But if you're using it high cohumulone hops, you think it's harsher, then don't use it, I guess.
Thank you so much
Yes.
for having me here.
Thanks for having me in Brazil. This is great.
And if you want to talk about your book,
It was a fun project. It was about a 2-year deal. I was kind of doing it on the side, just reading through hundreds of academic papers, trying to piece together as much of the science as I could and present it in a way that would be helpful to brewers. So I hope it is, and if you get a copy, I thank you for getting it, and I hope you like
how
it.
can we buy your book? On Amazon,
You
right?
can
I
buy
bought
it
it on
Yep,
Amazon.
on Amazon, and hopefully pretty soon on Google Play.